Hello, everyone. My name is Megan Ellsworth here at AskARoofer, and we're here for another installment of the AskARoofer podcast. To our guest, we have John Kenney from Kotney Consulting Group. Why don't we just get started and have you introduce yourself and
Sure.
Kotney Consulting?
Absolutely. Well, my name is John Kenney. I spent 45 years or so. I got to say so now because as each year ticks by, gets a little bit longer. In the roofing industry, I'm third generation roofer. My grandfather started in the roofing business in 1922, which is kind of lead into later on about why I love history so much. But I worked as a contracting side. As a lot of people like to refer, and actually I say it now because it's easier. I started from the rooftop and worked up into the boardroom with multiple companies throughout the years. And then 2 years ago, co-founded Kotney Consulting Group, with the main mission of working with roofing contractors on training, not so much like the workforce training like you're seeing with NRCA, but the rest of it, estimators, foremen, project manager, superintendent, admin, working with owners, and also doing business consulting on just for roofers, how to get the most out of their business.
How do you know so much about the history of roofing? How did you get into learning more about that history?
Probably around 10 years old, working in the company shop. It was in Dover, New Jersey, is where it was located. And we had this room, which was called the nail room. So it's exactly why it was called the nail room, because that's where nails and fasteners and pretty much everything else. So my job was to go in and straighten it up and organize it and count, put it in barrels, the same as it was every summer because it was a mess all the time. And I would do that. And I found this stairwell back there, and I went up through the stairwell to the top, and I found all these boxes of files and paperwork and like giveaways and stuff, calendars. They were my grandfather's. And there was stuff in there from the 20s, 30s, and 40s, spec books. And I started really looking at that stuff, and I'm like, wow, this stuff really tells a great history. I even found like my grandfather's financial statements, and at 9 years old, like I said, at math, kind of geeky, but I got into it and I learned a lot from self-studying. I'm like, wow, this is really interesting because I had stuff, we had stuff from the 20s and 30s. You got a different perspective because, when I was 9 years, it was like a 70, 71. So that scene was a kid, as you know, that was ancient history going back that far. Not so much as you get older, going back 50 years, it's not a big deal. But then that was ancient. I was like, there's a lot of neat stuff. What is this? I found it. What is this product for? What did they do with that? And I started getting into it. But then I started really figuring out, okay, how do I learn more and more? And I started, as I got older, I really got an interest in gathering information that kind of tells a great story of how our roofing industry has evolved.
So what types of roofing have kind of stood the test of time with your knowledge of the history of where roofing started and where we are now?
So when you go back and you look at roofing, the test of time, it's interesting. I mean, you have roofing pretty much from biblical times and, in BC, Egyptians and all the way back, all the way up to about early 1840s, pretty much didn't change very much. 1840s and on is where you come up with the modern day roofing. So when you look at that, you go back, definitely the clay tile made out of earth, local earth products. I mean, they're still used today. We still pretty much, if you ever go to even to a modern plant, the process isn't that much different. It's just been automated. It's still mixing of the different earth products to make your natural clay tile roofs. Slate was a big innovation. It's not used nearly as much today for weight constraints and other things, but a slate roof, there's still roofs in the United States here that were installed in the late 1700s, and the same over in Europe. You have roofs that are 200-300 years old that are still in service. So that's definitely the test of time. Waterproofing systems, not so much. There's been a lot of things throughout the years, but you got to remember throughout this original, couple millennia going backwards, your coatings actually came from, out of the Egyptians working with waterproofing when they were doing their pyramids. So, when you look at how does this stuff happen, a lot of times we think somebody sat in a lab, a scientist, and just it all came about. No, it all has ancient roots when you start going back on it. So one of the things I talked about when I was at the FRSA doing the history of roofing was, and a lot of people don't know this, I didn't even know it until I researched it, granules, reflective granules. Now, today we're putting reflective granules and we're working on carbon capture, right, to help get the carbon out of it. The granules that we're working off of today to develop that were discovered naturally. They were a blue and a red color by the ancient Egyptians. The first generation pharaohs actually discovered this, and they used it as a reflectivity. They didn't know anything about carbon capture at that time, of course, but they used it as a decorative reflectivity on a lot of their buildings. So that's what I'm saying. So we're now taking that natural natural occurrence that they found and using that today to hopefully develop more reflectivity and more carbon capture. So that's, again, tying that into history, how we go. So I would say a lot of things like that through the test of time. Now let's jump into modern. There's no doubt that even though it is one of the worst systems to work with, and I can say that from personal experience, coal tar pitch by far, built-up roof coal tar pitch is by far the most longest lasting modern roof that has ever been put in service, and possibly could be the one that will always be the one that lasted the longest. Now, today it's different. We don't really use it as much. But I remember in my early days in there, we worked on roofs, and we actually still did repair work and maintenance on roofs with coal tar pitch that were done in probably 1860s and 1870s. So these were already over 100 years old, and they were still in service in the 70s and 80s. And there's a good chance some of them might still be in service today if they continued to maintain them. So by far, that is probably the longest lasting roof system that's ever been in existence. But the problem with it is, whether it's naturally coal tar or it's processed through the coal process, it has creosote and different chemicals in it, and it burns your skin and your eyes. It's a horrible product to work with. I will not ever say it was a great product to work with. It is the worst thing I ever worked with in my entire career. And any roofer that's ever used it will tell you tearing it off is worse than putting it on. So we've all got experience with that. But by far, it's the longest lasting. So you got to give credit where credit's due.
Ask a Roofer minisodes are brought to you by AskARoofer.com and RoofersCoffeeShop.com. In each bite-sized episode, we explore everything from basic roof maintenance tips to the latest in roofing technology and sustainability. Whether you're a homeowner, a building owner, or just curious about the craft, these minisodes are packed with valuable insights to help you navigate your roofing projects and home or building ownership with confidence. So stay tuned, solve your roofing puzzles, and let's stay ahead of the curve with Ask a Roofer minisodes. Go to AskARoofer.com to learn more today.